Hey everyone, welcome to this session. Thanks for choosing us. This is the Engaging with Nonprofit Partners, What Are We Doing Right and Wrong session. I'm Alex Sloan. I'm Director of Social Impact at Auth0. We are a Seattle-based software company specializing in identity and authentication software. And I'm very happy to welcome our amazing panel of my friends here. We have Erin Baudo, who is head of Okta for Good and Vice President of Social Impact and Sustainability at Okta. We are actually merging with Okta right now, so happy to welcome Erin. Also Tristan Penn, who's Manager of Community Engagement and Equity at NTEN, an amazing organization. And then Nikole Collins-Puri, who is Chief Executive Officer of Techbridge Girls. So we're gonna have an unvarnished and real conversation about the pitfalls of working together as corporate and nonprofit partners. I'm going to just talk for one quick second here as an overview, and I'm going to take the perspective from Pledge 1%, which is a community that both Erin's company and my company have been involved with for a long time. It's a global movement of over the past 5 years, has activated over 15,000 companies in many countries around the world to put their resources to work in a 1% of equity and or 1% of employee time and or 1% of product donation model, the 1-1-1 model. And what that's resulting in is billions and billions of dollars of corporate philanthropic grants and tens of thousands of hours of volunteer hours that have been put out into the world to work with charities in our local communities. Now, that's amazing, but it's also a fire hose of resources being fired at our nonprofit and charitable partners. Even in disaster response, Pledge 1% spoke to the community recently and wanted to activate on supporting India. And in a matter of a week or two, we had 42 companies, including Okta and Auth0, who pledged over $26 million to support India relief. So that's amazing, but that's really a lot of power. And that we need to recognize the power and privilege that comes along with having those kinds of resources to bear. One other quick point I want to make is that there's no clear training path for CSI, corporate social impact, or sometimes called corporate social responsibility. I like the impact version, so I'm going to call it CSI. But there's no clear training path for CSI professionals. These are my peers. I'm one of them. These are amazing people with great intentions, with great companies that have strong values. But there's no formal training for social impact professionals. There's no necessary expertise in evaluation and assessment of nonprofits and their work. And sometimes there's very little experience amongst our peer set of working with nonprofit organizations or how to make a grant. So we are trying to make some very big decisions, working with very complex organizations, trying to solve very complex problems. And sometimes there may even be a mismatch of experience and skills. So matching all this good intention and these massive resources with what social change organizations actually need is not simple. Right, just doing the work, just pointing this fire hose of resources at charitable partners and hoping for great outcomes is not going to work. It has to be done carefully, it has to be done thoughtfully, with a clear eye to what the charitable organizations need, with a clear lens on equity, which Tristan will talk about, not just to support our needs, to support our brand, support our PR, support internal team building with volunteer events, or to fulfill a pledge like our Pledge 1% pledge. So that's my quick setup thoughts here, and we'll get our panelists to you in just a second here. So as you know, the bios are all on the platform, so we're not going to spend time doing deep intros. I want to spend the time on the content side. What we have here is a corporate social impact professional in Erin. We have an expert who is a connector and enabler between our two communities, and Tristan and what NTEN does as a facilitator of technology for nonprofit organizations, and then a practitioner on the nonprofit side as a leader in a fantastic organization. Obviously, feel free to talk for a second about what your organizations do. But Nikole, I'm going to jump in right here with a question to you, which is, what has your general experience been in working with corporate partners that really want to support what Techbridge Girls is all about? Are we valuable? Are we a manageable burden? Are we a pain in the ass for you, our grant partners? Maybe what's a highlight or a low light in terms of your experience personally and with Techbridge Girls in terms of working with amazingly helpful people like Erin and me?
Yeah, well, thank you, Alex and Erin and Tristan, for having me be part of this conversation. And I often feel like I have a little bit of a, multifaceted viewpoint from this, because number one, I spent 10 years in the STEM industry, bringing DSL to the consumer household, but then leaving that company, huge Fortune 50 company, leading diversity, equity, and inclusion for the Global Business Sales Organization, and then moving into philanthropy. So when I come to this work, I have a lens of like all the different moving pieces, what the social impact team is trying to achieve, the burden that sometimes social impact teams put onto the sales team when we start to talk about opportunities to engage with nonprofits through our products and services and resources. And I sit here as a CEO of a national organization that wants to be part of the 21st century and ensure that, as our name is Techbridge Girls, that we are actually using technology in an effective way. So I just premise that because I want to have you understand the viewpoints that I'm coming from and the empathy that I have from all of the different facets in which play a role into this work. What I've seen has been the most effective in the way in which we engage with corporate partners is, number one, like how you bring your expertise, your thought partnership, and your guidance to nonprofits in the way of specialty technology. And so oftentimes, nonprofits don't have an IT person that is full-time in their organizations. It's usually an office manager that has utilized the fantastic hundreds of videos that your organizations and corporations have created, and they sit down and teach themselves. They make lots of phone calls to customer service, but this is not their training. So if you can imagine, just as you all think about the opportunity cost and the regular cost it does for that person, not only to do the work, but to learn the work before they can even do it. And that's a huge, huge investment in a capacity strain on a nonprofit. So when a corporation can come in and listen to our needs, look at our vision, and give us that expertise and guidance and thought partnership, that is a huge, huge, huge benefit. On the flip side of that, I will just talk about a recent experience that we have. I think with the digital divide conversations that were happening and filling the gap of equipment for communities that we knew were going to rely very heavily on learning or work through a device, there was lots of donations around those devices. And many of my peers, I was with a few of them about a month ago, and all of us had some iteration of, we got the device, but it didn't come with an operating system. It didn't come with power cords. It didn't come with cleaning up in spyware or security software. So it's like the intent, of course, is good, but then the cost back onto the organization is huge because we need to fill in those gaps or create those resources to make sure that those devices are actually operational. So with that, that's a specific, but it's also understanding like sometimes the good intent without fully thinking about like the implications of it becomes some of the most challenging ways that we partner with corporations.
Absolutely, and I think that's our key theme for this whole hour, so we'll keep coming back to that. Erin, let me turn to you for a second, and you've done this work for a long time for a number of different companies, but what is your view on how we as CSI professionals can be most effective? What's a highlight or a low light for you in terms of the relationship between us and our grant partners?
Yeah, and thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here, and I love everything Nikole just said. I agree. I think it sets up this conversation extremely well. I would, as you said, I've done this work at a bunch of different companies. Okta is sort of the fourth company I've been in a social impact role, and so I've seen a lot, and I've seen it over time. I've seen a lot of things get better, and I've seen some things maybe stay the same, but mostly I've seen things get better. I would say what makes an effective versus not effective partnership between companies and nonprofits boils down to, can the nonprofit tell us what they need versus tell us what they want to hear? And in the instances where a nonprofit has told me or told my company what we want to hear, the outcomes just aren't as good. And when we do the work, you know, the Alexes and the me's of the world, it's on us to do the work to build the right level of trust and relationship and partnership with organizations. When we can do that and we enable those organizations to be honest with us about not just even what they need, but what their challenges are, what is hard, where they aren't getting the help they need, I think that opens up, you know, huge opportunities to do more. So I'll give you an example of each quickly to bring this to life. It was not at Okta, it was at another company. We had received some funding on the social impact team to do some kind of public art murals. And we thought that was great. And we had some artists on staff who were going to do this kind of as volunteers. And we reached out to a few boys and girls clubs in San Francisco to say, would you like some public art in your facility? Can we come beautify it? And the folks we spoke to at sort of the top of the food chain there said, yes, that sounds great. Please come. We'd love to partner with you. We'd love to do more. This sounds like a great first step. And when we got to one of the sites, it was very clear immediately that there had been no discussion with the community. There had been no discussion with the staff, and they did not want it. They didn't need it. And it was really, really difficult to sort of show up with the best of intentions, but realize that, like, oh my gosh, they had said yes to something that they didn't need. And now the community is actually upset about it. So that's, I think, a good example outside of technology, just in terms of like how you engage with communities as companies, where you just need to really, really work and be careful and understand, like, all the way down to the kids and the parents and the families and the community, like, is this something that they need? And push the nonprofit partner to kind of help you with that. I think on the when it works well side, I'll actually use an example from Tristan's organization, from NTEN, who is a partner and grantee of ours. NTEN CEO Amy and I worked for several months on a partnership. We were going to fund a cohort of nonprofit leaders, nonprofit staff members, to go through a technology training experience, learning experience. This was pre-pandemic. This was all supposed to be in person. We were going to source organizations from all over the country. And primarily our grant, which was a significant dollar amount, was to cover the travel for all these people to come in and learn together in a cohort how to better use technology, learn from each other, and do that several times over the year. We sent that check over right before COVID hit, and then you know, the world changed. And Amy called me up and she said, oh my gosh, like, we can't do this program as intended, and all this money was going toward travel, and like, do you want the money back? And I said, well, what do you need? And she said, well, nonprofit staff need this training more than ever, because this is about how you move to the cloud. This is about how you do remote work. This is about how you enable security, like Nikole was saying. They need this training. We can do it virtually, and we have an opportunity to maybe reach more people than we could have, because we don't have to fly everybody in. So what if we did that? And I said, let's do that. You know, and then we got into this really great conversation about how to tweak the program and how to tweak the funding to support what was actually needed, which was actually very critical in that moment. So I think that's a good example of when it works. But again, you've got to, we, the corporate folks, have to do our part to build that level of trust.
Erin, I'll follow up real quickly on something you said. Why would a nonprofit tell you what you want to hear instead of telling you what they actually need? Like, why wouldn't they just, why would that even happen?
I think there's this feeling that any partnership is good partnership, and any way in is good because it might lead to funding or it might lead to other things. And so part of that's true, right? Part of that is like, you want to enter relationships from a perspective of let's figure out what's here. But I think that the problem comes when we don't know what you need, and we don't have every resource to offer. Usually it's some, but not all, and we have to make decisions too. And so there's got to be that honesty, and I think that confidence and conviction on the part of the nonprofit leaders to say, we're not just going to take what you give us. We're going to tell you what we need. If you have it, let's talk. And if you don't, okay, I'm going to move on to the next company, and maybe they are a better fit. So we need to all be able to have those honest conversations.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think saying no thank you is actually very hard to do when it's a
Yes.
resource being
Yes.
offered, even if it's something you don't need. So, okay, Tristan, let's connect the dots here. This is great. I put in the chat for everybody this fantastic guide that Tristan put together with NTEN called the NTEN Equity Guide for Nonprofit Technology. So I strongly recommend that. I also put a link into Pledge 1%, that movement I mentioned earlier. So Tristan, help us to figure this out here. So what in your expert view works well and doesn't work well as it relates to corporate support of nonprofit partners? Where are the pitfalls?
Yeah, I think these are all really great pieces, and I'd like to think that like NTEN plays a part, not all the entire part, but also just brings it all together and starts to really, highlight those dots and connects them. So first off, just thank you so much for having me on this panel with Nikole and Erin and yourself. This has been such a great opportunity, and I really appreciate it. I think one thing that really stuck out for me from what Nikole was saying and also what Erin was saying, Nikole spoke to this idea that nonprofits, sometimes they don't have IT folks. It's the person that displayed the most knowledge of an Excel spreadsheet. Boom, you're the IT director. And then you have, and then Erin highlighted something that struck a chord with me, and it resonated with me really well, was this idea that, in Boys and Girls Club, and I worked for Boys and Girls Club, full disclosure, for about 16 years. And, it's been, she highlighted something that as a club director early on in my years, I would just be like, no one told me about this. So, when I was working for the club in Portland, big donors from Nike, Adidas, Under Armour would show up and they'd be like, we're here to paint a wall. And I would be like, this is the first I have ever heard of this. And, as someone who's in middle management, you don't want to, it's been drilled in your head that you don't want to ruin a good partnership, similar to what you all were saying earlier. And then on the other side of it, you're like, okay, I've got to just get in the kitchen and figure it out and bring out something that doesn't sully this partnership, but also I don't know, and I'm on my heels. And so I think there's a couple disconnects that, NTEN is able to see because of the work that we do is capacity building. So we don't have those clubhouses that that Boys and Girls Club has. We're a capacity building nonprofit nationally. And so we're able to kind of have our head above things a bit and see those hands that go up in the air and they're like, hey, I need help. I need professional development, like Nikole was saying earlier. And I think we're able to highlight those things and those deficiencies and also those gaps that need to get filled with the work that we do. And so a couple things stuck out to me in that, we talk about volunteer time and being able to make sure that when folks show up, that everyone is well informed. And I think it's when we're talking about those times where you come in and paint the wall or you're providing a mural, it is, yes, to Erin's point, nonprofits being honest, but also being honest in who they're speaking to. Because I think just coming from the perspective of someone who's worked in, all levels of nonprofit, there is at times a disconnect, not between, also, yes, between, corporate donors and the organization and the leadership, but also the leadership and those direct service folks too. And so there's this constant teeter-tottering of information tag or information, this telephone game that a lot of levels are dealing with too. And so I think it requires corporate donors to not only expect honesty from nonprofits, but also ask of it and ask who are the people and who are the point people within this organization that this is going to impact their role. And I think that's the distinction in terms of honesty that Erin's really talking about, is being able to understand, yes, we have the C-suite here with the organization, and they're window dressing hard, and they're saying, oh, everything you need to hear. But I think it's incumbent upon, the corporate donor to then ask, okay, cool. So who are the other people that are a part of this plan too? Because we don't want to show up and ask those things. And I think it also highlights a very inequitable power dynamic that does happen, because you have these nonprofits in communities, sometimes very saturated communities with nonprofits that will just be hungry for any sort of partnership, and so they'll take it without any sort of reservation. And that's hard. That's hard to do. How, when Nike approaches you and says, we want to donate this, and this is how we want to do it, you say, how high? And so that's drilled into that idea. Not all nonprofits, but it's this feast or famine thing, and you don't want to pass up a partnership as a C-suite member person in a nonprofit. And so there's that power dynamic that that really impacts how impactful a corporate donor situation can be. And that's just one of the pieces that we talk about in our equity guide to nonprofit tech. And so I'm ready for this conversation. I'm excited because it's a lot of things that I think all of us, at least on the nonprofit side, Nikole and I are like, yes, these are the things that need to get talked about so we can fulfill and build better partnerships and funding pieces that not only are one-offs, but are continuations of the work that we're doing. Not one grant cycle, not two grant cycles, but multiple grant cycles down the road.
So Tristan, let's go a little bit deeper on that. Thank you for those great comments, but take me a little bit level deeper. You said we should, in a sense, not only listen to the shiny materials that are presented to us.
Yeah.
But I'm not randomly calling Nikole's staff. I'm not asking for interviews with the students that Nikole supports. Mm-hmm. So how can I facilitate that conversation in a way that's respectful of the time and expertise in the organization that gets me deeper into the work and builds that trust?
Right. So I think it part of it is partnership and relationship. And part of it is not titrating it all down to one meeting to be like, bang, bang, boom, here's how we're going to provide these funds, these volunteer time, and think that it's all going to get wrapped up in a nice package for the nonprofit. I think it requires multiple meetings, and not only multiple meetings with folks, but being able to touch base with all of the arms of whatever the nonprofit is, and really getting a feel for it and not going into it with stars in your eyes and thinking, oh, wow, this is such a great community organization and they're doing such good work. Yes, they are. However, it would behoove those corporate donors to be able to touch base and have those same types of meetings with those middle management and direct service folks to see if this is actually a piece of funding or a piece of volunteering that fits within their programming.
Right, that's great. I'm going to open this to everybody here, and this is a question about, should we as funders be making, in terms of money and grants, should we be making programmatic grants, non-programmatic capacity building grants, meaning restricted to certain kinds of activities, or very broad core support grants?
Yeah, so I love this question, and working with the Women's Foundation of California, before I came to Techbridge Girls, we were a strong advocate for general operating grants. Trust your partners who work in the communities that do the work, that understand the context of the work. And trust that they will utilize the resources to make the impact that you ultimately want to see. And I also understand that it also depends on what your driver is. And I think that oftentimes corporate partners just have to be really honest about what is your purpose around CSI. Is it about,
Our purpose is,
CSI purpose around, and like, not, the internal, not the external view, but your internal. Is it about helping garner new market? Because there's a business sense to this. I mean, and this is not binary. I know all of this is, but there's oftentimes a driver that is leaned into more than others, or valued more than others, I should say, right? Is it about, retention, pipeline? Is it truly about community transformation and impact? Is it about the essence of collective impact and the approach to partnerships and what that can do around a certain issue or agenda? Because all of that is going to frame, how you actually see the return on those dollars that you actually provide to that nonprofit. Because you can, many, folks will just have kind of a broad philanthropy type of thing. And then they're like, at the end of 5 years, they're like asking themselves, well, we gave out all this money, but what needle did we move? And I think that oftentimes is the disconnect to what is really your driver and your purpose around it, because then that lets you get really focused on it. And not only around your dollars, but your time and capacity too, right? So that all of it is working toward the same agenda or the same type of outcome that we're trying to achieve. And that is more than what you per se put on your website, but more of what is the internal, what is validated and valued internally and reinforced and integrated in your values and business that ultimately creates that clarity.
Yeah, and I think that also leads us incorrectly to lean into programmatic funding, right? We want to buy impact. I want to see that you move the needle in 2 years on a pressing global problem, right? And so, that's my advice on this, is to stop trying to buy impact, to encourage the organizations to be able to build their measurement and evaluation regimen, to be able to report to all donors consistently on stuff, and understand that impact takes a long time. It takes 10 or 20 years to move the needle on some of this stuff. There are incremental milestones you can keep an eye on, but as a funder, don't drop in and say, I'm going to give you $50,000 for the next 3 years and I expect you to solve this problem and have every girl in America have STEM education and within 2 years, right? Sometimes the expectation and the timing and the resources being provided are way out of whack. So Erin, is Okta making programmatic grants? Do you restrict the funding to certain activities? Are you just giving core support to organizations that you're researched and feel comfortable with? How do you approach this question?
Yeah, I love Nikole's framing in terms of start with what your intent is as the company and be honest about that. And then everything kind of follows from there, including how you make grants and how you structure it. So for us, Okta is a technology company, and we care in our impact work about how the social sector is using technology, first and foremost. We care about a lot of other things, but that's the core of what we care about. And our stated mission of, is strengthen the connections between people, technology, and community. And sort of at the core of that to us are the organizations that are holding up our social safety net in the nonprofit sector. And so once we landed on, and by the way, it's extremely business aligned and aligned to Okta's strategy as we enable any sector and any organization to use any technology. That's what we do. So that works out nicely. But when we look at the social sector and we dig into, okay, well, how do we help nonprofits use technology? Well, we could buy a bunch of tech, devices and things and get people connected. All right, maybe, but we don't have enough funding to do that in a meaningful way. What we ended up really focusing on was investing in organizations like NTEN as our core capacity building organizations, because as we dug into this issue of why don't nonprofits have what they need to fully leverage technology? What are the real differences when you double click into what the gaps are and the challenges are? It's not, let me tell you, it's not because nonprofits don't know how to use technology or they're not innovative or they're not able to do it at all. In fact, we see some of the most innovation in the use of our product in the nonprofit sector, but it's a real gap in capacity and in operational and infrastructure to be able to do this. And first and foremost is how we fund nonprofits today. When you fund them for program and when you fund them for restricted use cases of that money, they cannot invest in their own capacity. And that includes everything from staff training to all kinds of infrastructure, including technology. And when we started to look at that and understand that with the help of partners like NTEN, it was so obvious to us that that is something we want to put our dollars and our voice and all of our muscle behind trying to address and just raising the visibility, because guess what? Most of my peers didn't know that. We don't know that if we make the default as restricted programmatic grants, that they can't invest in themselves, they can't invest in technology. And it's crazy when you think about it, especially when you're a tech company. So in addition to us putting a lot of investment in telling that story as loudly as we can, thank you very much for having me here so I can do it here too. We're also aligning our own practices to doing it the way we think is the better way to do it, which is we have now defaulted our grants to be unrestricted, general operating support, unless you have to convince my team now that there's a very good reason why it needs to be restricted and why it needs to be program grants versus general operating. That is something any of us in the corporate sector can do today. You can just do that. You can make that switch, right, to the default being unrestricted. So I encourage that. And then the other thing we're doing is really focusing on multi-year grants. So this stuff takes time. When you're talking about technology, when you're talking about capacity building, training, the things that we know ultimately are going to strengthen these organizations, you got to stick with it. So for us, we've now moved about 25% of our grantee portfolio to being multi-year commitments. We want to push that even further. That's where we are sort of a few years into being intentional about that. But those two things together, unrestricted funding, multi-year grants, can change the game.
Yeah, absolutely. This point came up on an earlier session where many nonprofit organizations have a lot of government funding, state, local, federal, particularly when you're doing direct service work. That work is typically paid on a per service delivery kind of a basis or a per participant basis. Oftentimes government funding is paid in arrears after the service is delivered. And so there's a cash flow problem right there. Oftentimes there's a 8% or 9% overhead cap, and you can only spend that amount of money on your systems and processes and growth and training and people, and everything else has to be direct service. So I think, and also I've worked in private foundations for many years. They oftentimes also have programmatic funding trying to buy that specific on the ground impact and limit the amount of money that's spent on the organization for, like overhead's a bad word, right? I mean, there's certainly examples where overhead has been way overdone. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about what does it take to grow the capacity of the organization to deliver and report on the programs effectively, right? That's overhead. And it is not 8 or 9% of what they're doing. So if government is funding that way, if private foundations are offering funding that way, you have individual donors and corporate funders who are the only ones left in the funding stream who could potentially not fund that way, and to cover what I believe is a not useful way to support organizations. And so I think, Erin, I'm making your point again here, that to give unrestricted funding, to get out of the way, to stop being so cute, to stop being so smart about it, and do the trust, do the relationship, and put your resources in the hands of organizations, and then partner with them over time. So next question, Tristan, over to you. I want to take a deeper dive here on the technology for nonprofit side. That Erin and I and our peers have some amazing technologies that can really help increase the efficiency and effectiveness and communication and impact of the organizations that we support. Oftentimes digital divide is talked about in terms of individuals getting access to technology, right? Getting Wi-Fi, getting a laptop, getting a tablet, getting rural students connected, those kinds, and that's a very important part of that too. And we make investments in that space as well. But can you talk for a second about the digital divide as it relates to nonprofit organizations and charitable organizations getting up to speed and staying on the current edge of the technology that they need to do the work that we're actually paying them to do in the first place?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think it actually kind of ties into the last question a bit, in that, with the digital divide, not all nonprofits are created equal, and they have specific budgetary, annual budget is like under 50,000. Is it under 1 million? Is it under 4 million? Is it a 50 million annual budget organization? And so a lot of those things, when you get with larger budget size, you have access to a lot of those tools, those technology tools. You're able to do those things. I'm talking about those nonprofits, the ones that Nikole talked about earlier, where you're like an accidental IT director just because you happen to click, Microsoft Outlook a couple times. And so, and when you do that, and there's lots of them, there's lots of smaller under 10 employee nonprofits that just don't have the access and are living in that digital divide because they just don't have the budget to buy, the Microsoft, G Suite or the Microsoft Outlook suite. And so, and that's really hard too, because a lot of times those smaller nonprofits are the ones, just as much doing the work. They're boots on the ground, they're knocking on doors, they're providing meals to all sorts of people and all sorts of community members. And they just don't have access to those technology things or technology tools or applications that make a nonprofit thrive. And a lot of times when technology is provided for them, it's done with strings attached. It's done with, well, we're only going to give you money if you do, if you take these specific tools, or you are, and you can only use them for, X amount of years, and then we need to like take them back. Or like Nikole was saying earlier, this is, there's no like user's guide or operations guide, or there aren't cords for the iPads. And so you're left with this kind of very patchwork Frankenstein style quilt of how you operate as a small nonprofit, just trying to make it work. And you're just trying to keep your head above the water. And so that digital divide piece is, those smaller nonprofits who are actually doing the work. And that's not to say that larger nonprofits aren't. I'm just saying that like, those are the underfunded pieces and organizations that are living in that digital divide. And if I can go back to like what we were talking about earlier, with those unrestricted funds, those are the organizations that need those unrestricted funding, needs it. And so it's really, and I'm going to be even more specific and granular. And yes, programmatic funding is great when it's done intentionally, and there are clear understandings and guidelines around how it's looking, sounding, and feeling, and there's honesty with it. However, if last time I checked, we're in a pandemic. And a lot of my colleagues that I've worked with in the past, a lot of organizations I've worked for in the past have done a lot of layoffs. They've done a lot of layoffs, and they've done a lot of just letting people go. And so the scope of their work has been diminished because of this pandemic. So when funders approach them and say, we have this grant and it's for X, Y, and Z, and it's a restricted grant, and you can only use it between these hours of the day in this room when the lights are on, and then when the lights are up. I mean, I've done it. I've gone through, after school programming materials and, basketballs, and labeled them that this basketball was for the 21st CCLC grant. And I've had to do that time and time over again. And so that paints nonprofits, specifically those nonprofits, in a corner hard. And so you're having to literally separate the pots and the pans for those things. And so so I just want to like make that the last point of like, during this pandemic, unrestricted funding should be something that everyone is prioritizing if you are wanting to do the work and not expect anything in return too, because, and similar to what, and Nikole, you're just saying everything that I like. And so I just want to keep on saying what Nikole said is that like, we need to make sure that unrestricted funding is there, and the trust needs to be there from corporate funders to be able to do so. And that will, diminish that digital divide that we talk about when that unrestricted funding is given.
For sure. And you talked about cords for iPads and getting on Microsoft Office, and Erin made a point also about like moving into the cloud. What about getting off of Excel for your CRM and moving into Salesforce? What about getting off of QuickBooks and moving into NetSuite or something like that? These are major investments that organizations have to make. It doesn't just come out of the budget, right? And you say, well, go raise money for it. Well, great, raise money from us, right? Or raise money or raise technology from us, right? Both Erin and I have programs to give deeply discounted of our product to nonprofit organizations. So some do some free and then some pay, or some do a deep discount across the board. There's lots of different models to do that. Some do, all free as well. But there's a lot of technology needs that nonprofits have, but figuring out what they need, how they can implement it, having an expertise around that. And we'll talk about skilled volunteering and pro bono consulting in a second. But I wanted to ask Nikole in this context, how can we as CSI teams do better at understanding the technology needs of organizations? How do we get a better sense of your sophistication and capacity, the staffing needs that you may have, the communications, the timing, the pricing, the cultural competency that we need to be able to deliver the product to you? So let's get off of grant making and stay on the technology side, because many of the peers on this call here have technology to give. There are a lot of issues around equity and access. So how do we be more sensitive in understanding how you even approach upgrading your technology and making those choices, and maybe even eventually implementing a major technology enhancement in your organization?
Yeah, this is, I don't want it to feel very tongue-in-cheek, but it's not rocket science. I would ask you, what do you do when you go out for a sales call with a customer? How do you create that partnership? You work with them, listen to what they need, probably do an assessment about what are the opportunities that most fit your products and services or resources. You then have a discussion around, what is the best fit based on the budget that they have, the capacity and the resources that they have to implement it. Then you go ahead and help them implement it in some way or give them some kind of service package so that you are able to do that. You wait about 3 to 6 months and then you follow up with them and say, is the product being used the way in which you intended it to be used by? And if not, let's have another discussion and let's reevaluate and that. And in that, you're building loyalty, trust, partnership, you're creating understanding, you're understanding the context, the community, the realities of the day-to-day with them so that ultimately they are utilizing your product in the most effective way so that they have a great experience and then become a upsell of another product in the future, right? I think that should be the same thinking as when you engage with a nonprofit. I always say it's like, and maybe it's my bias because I come out of the for-profit world, but I don't see in the business sense of engaging. We are a business. Nonprofits have to operate as a business. Our mission and vision is different. Our bottom line is different, but we need infrastructure. We're learning how, we want to scale. We want to create greater impact. We want to have a workforce that stays with us is competitive, which is just a very side note, is that remember in this world, we are also competing with you all for IT people. I cannot hire an IT person at $85,000+, and I'm sure you all are probably hiring them at 6 figures. So also just thinking about like all of those things are really important. The capacity of our staff, our staff members utilizing the technology the most effective way. All of those things have to be incorporated and looked at, and understanding that you have your own capacity of what you can and cannot do. But then let's be real about what you can and cannot do, because we know it depends on all of that stuff to make it effective. So if you only can do a portion of that stuff, then we need either the resources to supplement the rest of it. We need you to open up doors to other people in your network to help us obtain that. Or we need volunteers that can, strategically and in a committed way, help us move the plan forward. So I just say that because I don't think it's very different to how you deal with customers in your own world. And if you take that approach, then I think you're going to, number one, build a lot more loyal customers for the future, have huge impact data to highlight around your CSI goals, and you will be able to see your investment returned in the way in which positively impacts your bottom line.
That's great. And everyone, I'm looking at the questions as they come in and trying to weave them into the conversation as well. So thank you all for posting questions and comments. Erin, jump in here. Let's talk about professional services or the support needed to help nonprofits decide on what to get in terms of technology and then how to implement it. What's been your experience with sort of the pro bono professional services, consulting, whatever you want to call it, as it relates to getting technology in the hands of organizations effectively?
I think across the board, it is very clear that for companies like ours that have a technology that we sell and make available for free or for discount for nonprofits, that is not enough. I think that's been proven time and time again. We have a million examples of that. I certainly learned from, the good and the bad from a lot of peers as I started at Okta, 4+ years ago on this issue. And so the headline is giving product is just not enough. So as companies, we have to be really honest with ourselves and do it because there's value in it, but we cannot stop there. And if we stop there, and God forbid we stop there and then pat ourselves on the back about it, we're failing the sector, we're failing our partners. So what we noted very quickly at Okta is, Okta is not the most complicated thing in the world, but it is not like Gmail. Like there's some level of expertise you need to have to implement Okta, which is essentially single sign-on, multi-factor authentication, things that help your organization's people log in securely to their applications, right? You need to have some knowledge. And it was very clear to us that for nonprofits, while they were very happy to take advantage of our free offer, which we just extended to 50 free licenses for any nonprofit around the world, which is great, which covers like, I think 80% of the world's nonprofits are under 50 people. So we're getting it out there. And to my earlier point, folks are taking advantage of it and saying, yes, please, and accepting this donation, maybe because they think, it's sort of like they're saying yes without maybe telling us exactly what they need. But for the folks who've told us what they need, they say, we need help implementing this. We need help training our staff on it. So what we've done, and it kind of goes to what Nikole was just saying about like, use the muscle of your business that's already built and that's already running. Like, I think this is so important and so true for folks in our roles. For us, we could have very easily, as the social impact team, been like, okay, we're going to like create a brand new volunteer program that's specific to helping nonprofits with tech, and like anyone can sign up and we'll, pair people up, and it would have been a lot of work. It would have been maybe not the people we needed, maybe not getting the right information from the nonprofits, and it would have been recreating the wheel of something that already existed in the company, which is in effect our professional services team, who are customers who hire and pay to have them come in and help them, deploy Okta in their organizations. So instead, what we did is we said, all right, we went to that team, we say, you are a well-oiled machine. You know how to get in there and help organizations get up and running with Okta. We need to work together to figure out how to deploy your specific expert people to our nonprofit customers who need the help. And here's all the data that says they need the help. Here's the impact if we can help them just a little bit more, and what it would do. How do we do this? So we ended up doing, with the leader of that team, who's this amazing leader named Eric Kelleher, who's been at Okta for a long time. He said, all right, what if my team took the 1% pledge as a team? The company's taken the 1% pledge. There's this great model. I'm looking for ways to engage my team and empower them to, love their jobs and have a sort of be connected to a higher purpose while they're here. What if we took the 1% pledge? I give you 1% of our hours every year as an organization, because everything's billable hours with that org. And we donate those hours to nonprofits, but they're going to go through the same process and use the same people and the same experts as all of our other paying customers. And that's what we did. And that's the program we have. And it's working really, really well. It's still not enough, by the way, but it's a great model that now we can shop around and take to other teams at Okta who have other expertise we need, like our training team, our education team, and our customer support team, to say, all right, guys, what can you do? So that's how we're trying to tackle it.
Yep, that's great. I love that example. In a sense, like, it's take out nonprofit and put in small to medium-sized business, right? A lot of companies have an SMB strategy. Well, nonprofits, most are SMBs. There's, millions of nonprofits out there. I think something like 60-70% of them have under $1 million of annual budget. So they are small businesses, right? And they are, as Nikole said, absolutely businesses. So approach them as a vertical, approach them as part of your strategic plan, not just as, oh, those nonprofits we give stuff to over on the side as an afterthought, right? So appreciate that.
Exactly.
Tristan, let me ask you, are there technology capacity building collaborations going on there? I think it's very daunting for a nonprofit professional to say, okay, I need an identity solution, I need a finance solution, I need a CRM solution, and even know where to start, right? How, I'm picking up things like TechSoup and others, but tell me what you think about, are there communities that nonprofit leaders can step into to share and understand and to listen and to learn and not have to reinvent the wheel of their own technology strategy every time? Because most organizations need a fairly similar suite of solutions across the board here. So how do you engage in community here as a nonprofit tech leader?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think, NTEN was built for this. It was built for being able to provide community and to provide a space for nonprofit professionals in a very accessible way to everyone, regardless of budget, but also like prioritizing those smaller nonprofits that do have a smaller budget, that are under 20 folks. And I think being able to, it's like that rising tide lifts all ships type of model where, if you prioritize the most marginalized person in your group or in your community, and I mean, NTEN is very unapologetic about how it prioritizes and uplifts and commits to equity and liberation in all of our work, specifically racial equity. And I think we've done that, also like very, in the very literal of sense of prioritizing racial equity, but also that same type of model applies for like our community work. We are prioritizing those smaller nonprofits and advocating for them, because in that advocation, like everyone wins, even the bigger nonprofits too. And so I think there are lots of really great opportunities that we provide, case in point, the equity guide that we have. We also have a Tech Accelerate assessment tool that a lot of nonprofits utilize to figure out where they're at in terms of like growth. But I also think that, being able to be smart and wise and go into corporate funding with eyes wide open is something that we have been pushing lately, specifically with the equity guide, to ensure that, money isn't coming in flippantly, or funding isn't coming in flippantly, or tech isn't coming in flippantly. And so I think one of those things that Erin and Nikole also, spoke to was, those product donations too. I can't tell how many times when I was working for Boys and Girls Club, there was an iPad, a closet full of iPads with, that were collecting dust on them, that were used once. And so if you're not able to provide any of those, if you're not able to provide, cash funding that goes hand in hand with any of those pieces of technology, then don't donate at all. And, if you're going to provide any of those tech pieces, you have got to also supplement with cash funding to supplement and also fund that training, the professional development. And yes, NTEN provides that for all of our nonprofit professionals that are a part of our network. But, if that's something that is specific to like, whatever tool is, and you need to find that professional development and training within that like organization, similar to what Erin was talking about in, and also, what Nikole was talking about in treating it as though, what are the supports we need? We're treating you like a small business, then do it. And so, you don't get to just give and walk away. You've got to really, got to put that elbow grease in. And so NTEN provides all of that too. And that's not to say that NTEN provides the only way. It provides a way, and a way for some nonprofits. It may not work for other people. Maybe TechSoup is a better option for them. And so I think creating that community, and also, I mean, that's really what was the equity guide was born of, was getting all these people that were in nonprofit, a very diverse set of folks, coming together and saying, here is what we believe when we talk about equitable access and equitable utilization and equitable data usage within nonprofit technology. And so thus was born the, and I'm gesturing up here because this is where my second screen is with the equity guide, but that's really what was born of it too. And so, yes, this is primarily geared towards nonprofits. However, there's a whole section in this guide that talks about corporate funding too. And as Erin and Nikole were talking about it, they were checking off all of the lists and all of the dot points in that guide too, because it really is a great starting point for a lot of CSI professionals, organizations that have a big CSI branch or arm. That's something that is really has been a blessing of that, because I think, with our community, the power of it is we've had, a plethora, and we have a lot of experience when it comes to great, examples of corporate funding, but also not so great funding. And so, yeah, that's one of those things. One thing I would like to make note of too, and I know we've talked about like the brass tacks and like the nuts and bolts of these things, but I also want to talk just a piece on that communication side, because I think it's really important, the communication and marketing side of CSI. A lot of times corporations will give of something, and then they'll have their own marketing person put a blog out or put some message out too. And I really want to caution, if you're going to do that, there should be utilizing those stories and those marketing campaigns as a corporate donor is really tricky too. And it's, I say this, with a lot of experience when I was working at Boys and Girls Clubs. There was a lot of big name organizations or companies that were coming in and saying, what's this kid's name? Tell us their story. And really just leaning into these Black and brown kids need to tell their story too. And that's that's an example of CSI and racial inequity in practice. And so being mindful of the stories that you are telling when you're giving of this funding, resources, volunteering, whatever it may be, and they're used with informed consent, because there are actual people and community members that are behind a lot of these stories, and there's actual work that is getting done. And it's not just specific to the the community members that nonprofits work with. It's also the middle management and direct service folks that are being a part of this. And so being mindful of their stories and telling them in a responsible way that doesn't tokenize or put them on some very uninformed pedestal that they didn't realize that they were on. And I've seen that a lot, and I've seen it play out too, specifically as a Black man, as a Navajo man. These are things that I just grind my gears when it's like, you didn't talk to me. You didn't talk to any of the club kids that I was working with when telling the story. And now it looks a certain way. And so when you can incorporate not only the nonprofit side, the communication and marketing director, but when you can incorporate those actual constituents and community members, you're going to be telling a story that's true and with informed consent.
Awesome. And I think that's a fantastic note to end on. We're at the top of the hour. The hour went really fast for me. Let me thank my amazing panelists, Tristan, Erin, Nikole. Thank you for taking the time and sharing, and everyone who tuned into this session. Thanks for your attention. So back to the summit. Thank you.
Thanks.